big sky, big potential. In association with Mills and Reeve, this is Eastern Promise. Achieving more together. Welcome, dear listener, to the Eastern Promise podcast. I'm Mike Rigby, and you join me for episode 96, where together we will meet one of the most inspirational and motivational individuals in the east of England. In our region's tech hotspots, angel investors can mean the difference between success and failure, especially in Cambridge, part of the Golden Triangle with London and Oxford. I wanted to know more from an angel investor's perspective, and so, keen to learn, I asked veteran angel investor Peter Cowley to share his experiences, which he very kindly did. But as I discovered, Peter's story is far more compelling than that. So join me now for the tumultuous story of an extraordinary individual, Peter Cowley, on Eastern Promise. One of the major joys of doing this podcast is the people you meet. So many wonderful folk, all of them working incredibly hard to drive forward positive, progressive change in and for their sectors, industries, vocations and communities across the east of England. And then you meet someone like Peter Cowley. Peter is extraordinary. There's no other word for it. His status as a veteran angel investor in the Cambridge ecosystem is extraordinary enough on its own. But Peter's is a much deeper and more human story. I met Peter in the Garden Cafe in the Cambridge University Botanic Garden for an insight into his life as an investor, entrepreneur, father, and human being. Now, this is going to be a really steep learning curve for me. I'm in Cambridge University's Botanic Gardens, which my guest today has given me a fantastic excuse to come and meet here, Peter Cowley. I'm not sure I can do you justice in an introduction, and everyone in Cambridge, I've already been told, will be really excited to hear this interview. So tell us something about your background for those who might not know you.
What, the 10-second one or the couple of minute one?
As long as you like.
Yeah, well, I won't go on too long because most of it's online and people who know me obviously know a lot of this anyway. Brought up in Hull in Yorkshire, was studious enough to come here to university to do engineering and computer science, worked in London for a bit for a software house, then moved out to Bavaria to join a small tech company that I'd been working with on a brewery development project in South Wales. That was going bust, sold itself to another company. Two of us decided to form our own company, so that's the first tech company I set up back in 81, called Gercom. 3 years later, my eldest was born, who's just turned 40, came back to the UK, set up CamData. CamData was 40 years old about 6 weeks ago, so it's had a very rocky ride, which is described in both my first book and the third book that's coming out soon. So built that up, but at the same time I started developing alcoholism. That got in the way. Once I got over that, then I got involved in property development. I'd moved to Stamford in Lincolnshire at this point. Built some houses, did some refurbs, moved back to Cambridge in 2004 because of change of relationship, embedded myself in the community here over time. Was all kinds of things, salesman, marketing director of a medtech company. I was involved in property, I was involved in charity. And then I stumbled on angel investing just by investing in somebody I was mentoring. We sold that within less than 3 years to Redgate, which is a software company here in Cambridge, for about 18 times what I put in. It wasn't much I put in, so it wasn't really even car changing what I got out of it, unless it was an old second-hand car, but it meant that I got to understand what angel investing was. I know as a personal friend, a very close friend now, one of the two guys who set up the Cambridge Angels joined that group, learnt everything from them, and now of course teach. Became chair of that at some point. Set up a VC with Marshalls, the Marshall family, called Martlett. That helped as well. And then the guy I'm seeing for coffee straight after here put me forward as Angel of the Year in 2014, so 10 years ago. I won that, and then sort of my brand started to build. So I was investing my own money and of course Marshall's money through the Martlet VC, and in the end at about 75 companies. I became president of the European Business Angel Network. I was on the board of the Global Business Angel Network. I've lectured in 40 countries. I've had some financial success with angel investing as well. I've been on 40 boards. I've written 2 books now, and the third book coming on. So that's my business life in a nutshell. There are some personal stuff which we will talk about.
So I'm just curious, actually, listening to all that. At some point, surely you should become an archangel investor.
Yeah, I have been called that.
Yes, I was going to say, you must have been.
Jenny Chapman, who used to be the business editor of Cambridge News, actually published me. I don't know whether you've seen today's IQ magazine, but I was on the front of her magazine.
Yes, I can confirm.
You've seen one at...
And you are, that's the same top you're wearing today, in fact.
It is, it's branded, it's the merchandise.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she put a halo over my head on this magazine, which I absolutely hated. And I hate the term super angel or archangel, because I'm not doing this, you know...
Well, I've started this well, haven't I?
I do it because I love it, and I've said many, many times on many stages that if I got all my money back that I invested plus £1 or a euro or a dollar, I'd be happy, because it's the working for the younger entrepreneurs that's so motivating. Most of them are a generation or even now a generation and a half younger than me, and as long as they listen, and I wouldn't invest unless they did, then I've just really enjoyed that journey. It's been like being a teacher to super receptive pupils, basically. Ones that really are motivated to learn the whole time. And so I've spent the last 15 years doing that, just enjoying life.
So what's been the biggest, I mean, I completely get what you're saying, that you do something because you love it and because you can and because you're passionate about seeing something really good come out of it. And that's why I do this. So what for you do you think is the biggest buzz you get out of being, or you got out of being an angel investor? What was
the people. It's
just the people.
It's the people. It's seeing people develop, not with some assistance from me, of course, but assistance from others as well, funding them in a way that they need, and then developing into achieve their own goals, which generally, if they've had external investment, is some sort of increase in value of the company, because that's what we want as angel investors. We've got to offset the risk there is in investing, which is very high, with some sort of financial return from other ones to offset that. So it's that growth that they're on, it's helping them do that, and then with the books to help other angels become angels, etc. That's what's driven me so strongly in the last 15 years, is just people.
That's extraordinary. So what is the thing, I suppose, that the mistake most people make about angel investing? What's the one thing that is the sort of the obvious cock-up that people make when they're trying to move into becoming an angel investor?
Yeah, there are 2 things. One is, which I did for the first 3 years or so, was back ideas and markets and products. I'm very techie. I'm wearing 2 smartwatches. And we just talked about tech before the interview started.
We did.
So you've got to back the people. And now you've got to understand what people to back, and that does take time to work it out, because good people will listen and they will pivot or change and they'll grow the business that way. So, you know, a product which sounds like it's going to really, really work, and I've backed a few of those that have failed, isn't what you need to back. You need to back the people. So that's the first point. And of course, it's very difficult for a new angel to know how to back them, because they don't know what characteristics to look out for. So it's generally best if you do it with a group or shadow somebody else into it. And then the number 2 thing that people get very wrong, and there's lots of statistical data about this, is not having a big enough portfolio. So you've got to play the numbers game. So if you only invest in 1, 2, 3, 4 companies, then you've actually got a pretty good chance of losing all your money. Once you get to about 20 companies, then you've got a good chance of at least getting your money back plus a bit more. And the numbers I use after that, once you go to 45 companies, the spreadsheet's too big really, and you just get, why? You know, because you're having a transaction probably once a week with 45 companies. And then once you get to 75, which I've got. So yeah, so it's people and it's numbers. It's a numbers game.
Right. And so have you always been that kind of people person and a numbers guy?
I've definitely been a numbers guy. I mean, my wife, who I only married last year, my third wife, Lise, her soul is nourished with music and art. that doesn't that doesn't apply to me. Well, my soulish nourishment, if this is the right phrase to use, is with people and numbers. So yes, I've always been a bit too geeky really in terms of numbers. So that numbers really matters. And if you look at my website, which you probably have, there's all the statistics, all the failures, successes, and the numbers. So I've got a lot of data I can use, and that's the final. The 13th chapter of my first book, which is also on the website for free, has got lots of numbers in it. The people different though. I was super shy as a teenager. I was, head down, getting on with the homework. Had an electronics lab and a chemistry lab at home. Didn't really mix at all. And it was what made the difference was between school and university, because I had to do a 7th term to get into this place. I went to live with my aunt in Australia because my mother's sister married an Australian, and she was the one, or both of them together. He was the one who taught me how to drink, which probably wasn't a good idea, and socialise, and she was the one who challenged me and opened me up. And I came back here, so I came back and started working for a pub in my hometown of Hull, meeting some really interesting people there, and then came to university, and that's when I started to come out of my academic shell. But it still took literally at least a decade more than that, or probably 2 decades before I got to the sort of person I am now.
What is it about Cambridge? And I say this as someone who's been drawn to Cambridge in an aspirational sense, in a sense of just wanting to get to know the city, to get to know the ecosystem, and being really just intrigued and driven to find out more. What is it about Cambridge that makes it such a hotbed? I mean, we talked briefly before we started this interview about at what point you start the race to catch up with Cambridge, and there have been various numbers bandied around in how many years you need to invest. What's the X factor here? What's the secret sauce?
Partly it's quite small, so you couldn't replicate this in a city the size of London at all. There's lots of little pockets of people who know each other quite well. And you can't, obviously, even the size of Birmingham, or Manchester's trying at the moment. So I've been up to Manchester several times to try and help with that, and you probably saw there's a closer bond between Manchester and
I want to cover more on that, mainly because I'm a Mancunian by birth, and any excuse to return to the land of my fathers.
Yeah, so there is a size issue, which of course, if you would listen to Michael Gove's statement just before Christmas, I don't know if you saw that, which frightened everybody. It happened to me the day he announced it. I happened to be at an event. I got an honorary doctorate from the other university here, from ARU.
ARU, yeah.
And at the dinner, the mayor was there, the current mayor. That's an obviously elected post.
Oh, Dr. Johnson.
No, the mayor of Cambridge.
Oh, right, the city, right.
Yeah. And she hadn't heard at all, so she was pretty annoyed about this, as you can imagine. The Gove suddenly announced 250,000 homes. Now, there are a lot of homes being built around here, and I've just been up to Ely, actually, and I noticed by the A10, a huge development at Water Beach that's presumably thousands of houses.
Yeah.
Marshall's is talking about another 12,000 houses, so there's huge amounts going on. So it may get to the point where the interconnectivity of the city starts to break. So if it's small and people start to get to know each other and trust each other. It's a bit like a village. I use the village term occasionally, and there are 2 occasions where somebody's tried to get in, done something distrustful, stroke, almost criminal, and they've both left the village and disappeared to one up to Blackburn and one into London. So there's almost some gossip going around. There's a lot going on in this. So once you've got in there, then there's the interconnectivity. Even the people one knows is strong. It's a big group, and of course it's one hop away from almost anybody in the city.
It is. That is so true.
Yeah.
I've found that it's the kind of thing that before I made those hops, it was really kind of daunting. Post-hop, if you like, I couldn't understand why people found it so difficult. It's like...
But in order to get accepted, you've got to give. You've got to give, you've got to be seen to be honest and open, and not wanting to monetize whatever skill you're bringing too soon. Obviously, if you're a lawyer, at some point you have to do. And so there's an awful lot of free advice going around. So one of the big differences in Manchester and Cambridge, which I hope is changing, is that if somebody's raising money there, they go through a broker usually, and that broker's super possessive about that relationship. They've got exclusive arrangement. Here, that doesn't happen at all. Obviously we don't talk about stuff that's not patented, so there would need to be an NDA and non-disclosure agreement for that. But generally, everything's shared. There are of course different cities here. There's a large proportion of the city that doesn't want this growth, and there's something called the Grafton Centre.
Yes, I know the Grafton very well.
So I was involved partly with the project by the Pioneer Group to work out what what they should put in that building, and they just got planning permission through last week. And there's a lot of people against that, a lot of, not as strong as not in my backyard, but people who don't like the growth, because the growth has got its problems. It's transport infrastructure, disaster, house prices, disaster, and this is all happening because it's growing faster than these medieval streets can cope.
Indeed, and there's a certain amount of, we see this place, from the external point of view, this place is magic, this place is really successful, we want a rub of the green, as it were, we want a bit of the, share the cake, and we want to be seen to be coming in and making all magic. And my view on that is very simple. That has to be a decision for this city and nobody else.
Well, the city, who are the city? What is the city?
Well, that is a very good question, actually.
Because it's the universities, not just one, but both universities, because ARU, Anglia Ruskin, is actually a bigger university than, in total, than Cambridge University it is, in terms of number of students. There's obviously the local business community. There aren't many big companies. Arm, obviously very big, international company, Marshalls, AstraZeneca. So there are some big companies, but an awful lot of small companies. Clearly it's the politicians, the Cambridge Council, and South Cams is a really important part of it, because Cambridge itself is relatively small, whereas South Cams provides a lot of employment, and most of the residents live outside Cambridge. Not most, but a lot of them live outside Cambridge. And it's the fact that people, well, this is going back to transport, but yeah, it's a joint decision where the politics actually sometimes gets in the way. Money will get in the way.
Yeah.
One of the issues has been, which you might have already found, is that we're seen as doing too well, really, to have external government money. And that makes sense. If you want to level up, and you come from Lancashire, I come from Yorkshire, then you don't want to be putting the money here. However, the actual added value per pound put into Cambridge for the country is actually higher.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look right, but it probably is a better use of the money.
It doesn't, but there's a lot of, I think Gallup did a lot of research on this, and I wholeheartedly cleave to this point of view, in that you don't invest in improving weakness, you invest in where you are strongest, and that pulls everybody with it.
Exactly.
And that is, talking about just, we'll move on to other things in a minute, but just, I'm bound to say, aren't I, that we did a couple of panels with various people, including Rob Hopwood of Bidwell's, looking at how the Breckland area of Norfolk can support the growth of Cambridge, being equidistant between Norwich and Cambridge, and it's on the route, it is directly linked by both road and rail. To Cambridge by direct links. Yeah. It's the only place between Norwich and Cambridge where those
come together.
They come together. The A11 and the rail link to Cambridge, and there's beautiful towns there that I think there's space. And we're looking at things like forest villages where it's shrouded in trees, active travel, affordable housing. Why not? And I have to say, we've had local authorities on those panels, and it's been a really, really great discussion. Anyway. I have a question from Zicky Lim of Mills and Reeve, who posed this to me earlier, and so I promised I would ask it to you. And we may jump around a bit on this, but does Cambridge have an issue with retaining its scale-ups, losing them to the US? And is that, I don't know whether things like that are a real issue, or are they a problem of we just need to reframe the narrative around that?
Yeah, no, my fairly strong views, which disagrees with some other people's views. So my view is that, a bit like Israel, which I've visited the ecosystem there, startup ecosystem, they call themselves the startup nation. And to a large extent, we're the startup city here. And the reason we are that is because we do, in principle, sell out early. We don't grow the businesses up to the size that we talk about, to scale up to 2,000 people. Very rarely. Arm's an exception, of course. That's nearly 40 years old now, I think, 35 years old. Marshalls is 110 years old. So we do autonomy grew quite rapidly. We know what happened to that. They sold to HP, of course. So we're very good at that early stage. Now, it has its advantages. Well, if you're going to have external finance, particularly for a venture capitalist, they're on a time frame. Angels are not. Angels are much more patient than venture capitalists. Venture capitalists usually need to deploy capital over 5 years and then reap the benefits over the next 5 years, because funds are about 10 years long. So that means they're under pressure to sell the businesses, and therefore selling them means almost certainly an external organisation, well, will mean an external organisation buying them, because stock market in the UK is a bit of a mess at the moment, and generally these organisations are from other countries. Now some are, of course, in the UK. So there's pressure from the investors, if you need early stage investment, to exit. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because it means that the founders, who probably have to work for a bit longer with the company, and some of the staff will, either the choice of working or not, they will have some money, including the senior staff or staff who have been there for some time, who've had options that have been vested, and they've cashed those in. They will go on and maybe found another company. So therefore you're starting again, you're getting the replication again. Or they'll go on to be the sort of thing I am in the Cambridge Angels, which is not starting another company, but helping, both with money and with time and experience and connections, helping these startups. So that's the one point, that actually I think we're better at doing that. The other big point, which was mentioned to me some years ago, is that if you do build a bigger company, you need people who've worked in corporate environments, who are not usually the startup founders. And although this comment's a bit more pre-COVID than it is now, actually, if it's an office environment, getting a very senior sales director or very senior HR director, who probably needs to be in the office, to come to Cambridge means relocating. And if they come from the north, house prices are very high. If they come from London, it's not too bad. And if that company fails for any reason, or the relationship with the company and they want to move on, there isn't necessarily another company to move to. So the really senior people will struggle if they were to move on. Now, with COVID, it's different, of course, because people are working from home more. Salespeople, if it's international, would probably be a bit closer to one of our airports around London. So personally, although a lot of people disagree with me, I think we do it really well, that we grow them and then we sell them on. Now, in most cases, selling them on does actually keep the core, like Arm has. The majority of employees of Arm are here in Cambridge and have remained in Cambridge. Obviously, you've got sales offices around the place, some tech offices. So in CSR, of course, was bought by Qualcomm. So Autonomy was bought by HP. They tend to stay. They leave the people here. So the profit made by the organisation, of course, is almost certainly on the stock market somewhere. And stock markets are all in principle global anyway. So you can still invest in take HP as an example in Autonomy. One could still, Autonomy was generating profit, maybe. Talk to Mike Lynch about that. Actually, you don't want to talk to him at the moment. He's just been sued for $4 billion. Did you see that last week or this week?
It's not quite Trump standards, but it's not. Still will hurt.
But the profit, of course, they were listed on the UK stock market, but of course foreigners could invest in that. Bought by HP, and people can still invest in HP. It's just on a stock market, with some currency risk if you're investing in American Nasdaq in dollars. So my view, which probably disagrees with Vicky, and I'm going to actually coming to the same event as you later.
Yes,
so I'll just talk to her about it. For the professional companies, actually they do want them to grow. So they have a slightly different requirement, because they want to grow with the big companies. So they'd like to, the lawyers, the accountants, the patent agents would rather deal with much bigger companies. So we don't have quite the same alignment between the founders, the investors. There's misalignment occurs at times, and of course the advisors and professional companies around about.
I think sorry, Zicky, but I'm with Peter on this one. My view's always been, I know from, I've done a couple of interviews now in the computer gaming sector in Norwich is this really small, nimble indie setup, small indie market, whereas Cambridge has bigger established studios like Frontier and Jagex. And the worry is in the Norwich sphere that we're going to get our staff, our ideas are going to get bought and poached by Frontier and Jagex and etc. And my view's always been, so then to make that virtue of that, this is where the ideas come from. This is where the ideas are born. Isn't that fantastic? And that may be just because I'm someone said, relentlessly, crushingly optimistic and positive about things, or hopelessly naive.
But how do you stop them? The only way of stopping them being sold is somehow to exit the early investors, because they want to get out. Angels want to get out at some point because they want to reinvest the cash. VCs have to get out because of their time frame. So you need the cash available to buy us out without it being bought by say an American or Chinese company, or you want a decent stock market in the UK, which it appears it's not in its best part of its cycle, if it is a cycle.
Yes. I noticed the eurozone inflation figures with some interest and a raised eyebrow.
What were they? What are they?
I think they're about 2.8%.
Okay, so they've done well with that.
Yes, and America's 3 point something.
And we're 4 point something.
Yeah. But anyway, so how do I try my next question to alter it into the most positive way to put this as I can? You talked about it being about the people, and Anglia Capital Group. I talked to one of their Laura from Anglia Capital Group yesterday, and she was saying, ask him about what things are a turn off in terms of ageism. But I don't. Sorry, Laura, but I think that's almost looking at it the wrong way. How does an angel help someone? I'm asking for a friend who may have not, shall we say, not the greatest. They may be very much the ideas driven, but when it comes to actually the admin side of running and owning a business, that's just a nightmare and an ongoing car crash. So when you gel to the person and the idea, how does an angel kind of encourage that, or do they just say, "I'd love to, but"?
Yeah, of course, there's many times that when my brand was very strong, then I was getting 1,500 business plans a year coming in, and I invested in 7. So 199 out of every 200, I was saying thanks, but no. First of all, it's difficult for a single founder to raise external funding. It usually has to be 2 or even 3.
Yeah.
And those 2, let's say there's 2, have to be complementary skills. So it's usually somebody with a technical background, because angels generally invest in product businesses rather than service businesses, because product businesses scale with the technology, service businesses scale with the number of people. So you can't grow it nearly as fast, and it's very dependent on the people. So you've got somebody who's doing the tech, and there's got somebody who might be very technical as well, but also knows more about the administration and is generally more charismatic, because the process of raising money is effectively selling a vision to somebody else. Selling the vision to me as an angel. So you can't prove that whatever your idea is going to work, because if it was working, you wouldn't need any money at that point.
Exactly.
Or you'd borrow it from a bank or something like that. So you've got a deck, you've got what's called an MVP, a minimal viable product, possibly something you can show, and then you're saying, what I believe is that we can definitely get this working. Fingers crossed. There's definitely a market for it, fingers crossed. We can definitely get into the bigger market, fingers crossed, and we can finance this growth, fingers crossed. And if they can come across in a way that is believable, they, in the plural, not the single, although it's generally through the one person who will
there's that
likely to be the
connection,
CEO, then they can get an angel or more angels together, or a VC, and believe that they're going to achieve what they're going to achieve and then would invest after the negotiation and due diligence.
Yeah.
So it comes across. So you need the fact you're not good at admin. In fact, the 2 founders generally, particularly if they're younger, probably aren't very good at admin anyway. There's 2 founders together, so they've got to then outsource some of it to a bookkeeper, say, or an HR agent, and they'll certainly outsource the legal stuff to somebody. So they don't necessarily need to have that skill to start with, though it does help if they can understand it in principle, because it means that if something's going wrong, they're at least underlying. And there's one of my, I don't know if you read my letter to my 29-year-old self, but I got it really wrong at around about age 29 actually, or no, 32, where it's in the book and on the website, I'd assumed the bookkeeper knew what she was doing, and she wasn't, and she was doing I don't know how financially aware the audience for this are, but
they'll be pretty savvy. You're all right.
She was posting.
It's only the host.
She was posting goods purchased, because we're a hardware business, to stock and not to cost of sale. So the stock figure was going up, which actually means you make a decent profit, and cash was not there. And it took about a year to work this out, that there was actually 80k in stock that should have been cost of sale. So our gross profit was much less than we thought, and therefore, of course, our cash position was less. And that was strong naivety on behalf of the board, basically. And when we found that, then we had to borrow some money to, because we were fooling ourselves, and of course we were fooling the bank as well at the time.
One of the things that's come up in preparation for our Food Science Summit next week is a look at the investment piece, and how, not just exclusively Norwich, because obviously we've got Ipswich and Colchester and other cities, towns and cities, but they're never going to be Cambridge, but how can they, if you take an ecosystem like Norwich that's largely reliant on angel investors, not exclusively, but largely reliant on angel investors, and the maturity compared to an ecosystem like this doesn't seem to be there, not like Cambridge. What do they need to do to at least make steps? They're never going to quite catch up, and maybe they don't need to. Maybe that's the wrong suggestion, but what do they need to do to move that investment ecosystem to maturity? So you've got spin-outs and startups at the Norwich Research Park, the Food Enterprise Park. How do they get more traction than just relying on those angel investors?
Well, first of all, you've got to decide whether you need external investment, because it is definitely true, and there's lots of stats on this, that if you have external investment, you're more likely to fail. So, because the investors are wanting rapid scaling growth, and as you're on that journey, they don't want you to make profit because they want you to reinvest it the whole time. Mm-hmm. So you get to the point on that journey and something happens, COVID is probably the worst thing that could happen, but other things happen which means that the investors lose faith. It's usually because they've promised something and under-delivered it, which is absolutely normal for entrepreneurs anyway, but there's a point where they say, you've overpromised and under-delivered for too long, we're not going to put any more investment in. And if the current investors don't do that, new investors are very unlikely to, because they're saying, your current investors are not investing, why should we?
Yeah, well,
if you get to that point and you're still not making a profit, how do you pay the bills any longer? Because you're making losses. And investors tend to want it to scale, and they actually, effectively, that process may break a company does break a company. And if you look at my website and all the failures, it's because investments dried up, almost all of them, investments dried up before product market fit's been reached. Product market fit means you're selling a product or service to the market and they're willing to pay you enough money for it.
Yeah.
Anybody can sell at a loss, but if you're selling
a
profit. And so if you can get away without that, all the better, so you don't have to rely on an investment ecosystem. But the only way really to do that is to have either your own money, of course, but that would discount that, family money or savings, is to have a service business. A service business is, of course, I don't think you've had one yourself, but if you take a graphic designer or a software engineer, they can set it up and sell themselves immediately. They don't need to develop a product, nor do they need to develop a market. So it means that, if you take the 5 million or so businesses in the UK, of which something like 4.5 million are small businesses, almost all those are service businesses. Almost all those, they're selling the services of obviously the owners, the entrepreneurs and the staff. Once you need to get to the point where you do need external investment, which is usually because the product's not available, it hasn't got to market, these both cost money, etc., or even the market doesn't exist, which does happen, then you will need some external investment. You can't get that from banks, as we know, which you might have been able to do some years ago, or you still have to put your house on the line, I suspect. To do that, you need to build up an ecosystem of investors. And the investors that are best in that situation are ones who already been on an entrepreneurial journey, because it's not just money, it's also advice. The biggest issue of all, and this applies to everybody, and I'm sure it's even applied to you in your podcast series, is the mistakes that you didn't realise you were going to make.
Yes.
And of course, if you've got somebody like me around, and there's quite a few of us like this in Cambridge, we can sort of say, by the way, just be careful about that, because, and then people start to make less mistakes. Yeah. And that's what my 2 books are all about, is, try and reduce the number of mistakes, because each mistake can be, some can be fatal to the business, obviously, and each one is going to cost money in some way or other. It might just cost time, but time costs money, etc.
Indeed.
So it's a matter of attracting people in. Now the best way, and I've helped do this in Silverstone actually, when they set up an angel group there, is to get somebody in the community who has got money and has probably got some presence in the community, and then gathers other people around them, so motivates them to get involved. And then of course an angel or an early stage investor, they might have invested in family and friends a bit, where trust is the main thing, but of course then to invest in somebody they've never met before takes quite a lot of courage. Writing that very first check as an angel is really painful, because you've got to understand your own risk appetite. Whatever you do, when you see these couple of entrepreneurs in front of you, there's always something wrong with what they're saying. How can you assume that? you assume you can get 10% growth a month or every 3 months or something like that. Prove it. Well, of course, can't prove it. They haven't done it before. Well, if they've done it before because they're a serial entrepreneur, they're on their second or third time, then they'll probably quite easily raise money, particularly if they've been successful on those journeys before. So it's a kingpin or queen pin, should we be there, which will then attract others. And Anglia Capital Group, which I of course know through Stuart McDougall, who helped set it up, who actually bumped into him today, is a good start. So you've got an angel group there that should attract other people in, but you need people who are willing to take risk, obviously going to write checks, and if at all possible, can add some value by helping the entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So is it very much that with angel investors, if you can't afford to gamble, you shouldn't play, as it were?
The figures they say is you should never spend more than, invest, not spend, though it feels like spending sometimes, more than 10% or possibly 15% of your net wealth, excluding your house or houses and pension. So this should be money you've got there, which is savings, and if you were to lose that 10 or 15%, it should not make any difference to your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it's the if you have an asset allocation spectrum from cash to lottery tickets, say, it's towards the lottery ticket end. And the other thing I must say about lottery tickets or betting on the horses or on the dogs is at least you get a result within a week or two, or the next election date or something. But with angel investing, you could wait a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. I mean, you've mentioned your website a few times, and I want to give you the opportunity to tell everyone what it is.
Yeah. It's just my name, petercowley.org, so not .co.uk or anything, it's .org.
Right, that's perfect, and please do go and look it up, because it is you have, just check with, oh good, we're right on time. You've had a fascinating journey so far, and you were describing in the opening everything you've done, and I just feel myself thinking, you just start reevaluating your own life in the basis of someone who's squeezed so much life and so much experience in. So, is there anything else? Because you've sort of said there's more to Peter Cowley than being an angel investor. So just
exactly.
Please explore it.
So I've still an entrepreneur. I've still got two businesses, a small tech business and a publishing business, which is working on the third book, which I'll mention in a moment. So I've had sort of, when did I leave university? In 77, so what's it, 47 years ago. So I've had sort of 47 or 44 years of being an entrepreneur, 15 years of being an angel investor. I've had 12 years of being a charity trustee, so I was chair of the CAB for the whole region, all 66 euro at one point.
Oh, wow.
I was chair of Focus 12, which is in Bury St Edmunds, which is a drug and alcohol rehabilitation charity, chair of a private school here in Cambridge, which is a charity. So I've done that. I've had obviously life as a property entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur, etc. But I've had a few things have gone wrong in my life, which I'll just mention now. So first of all, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I haven't had a drink for 24 years, but I had 10 years of pretty difficult times in my late 30s, early 40s. I've got late-stage cancer, so it's with the, if I believed in God, it would be with the grace of God that I'm so well. I mean, I've just come back from Antarctica and I've been skiing twice this year, which is why I'm quite tanned at the moment.
Yes.
And I'm doing 2 half marathons in March, so I've just kept myself very fit. And I've had this cancer for about just over 2 years now. But life's terminal anyway, but it's stage 4, so there are tumours all over my body. Although they're kept at bay by a tablet I take once a day, which was invented by AstraZeneca, which is a Cambridge company. So I've got cancer, and I've just decided, because of other life events, that I should write a memoir with some themes. And the 2 other big life events, one is the loss of 2 children, both by suicide. One, 15 years ago, the narrative there was different, and if you read the book, you'll see why I'm less, obviously grieving. I will always grieve. Losing a child is the worst thing any parent can ever have. And then losing my son, my youngest son, in 2022, who had actually co-founded the Investor with me, and then moved to the VC that I'd set up Martlet. And the book describes how I've coped with those, and how I think I've actually, despite the trauma of that, actually developed in some way to help others from those. So I haven't really worked out exactly how, but I know I have done that, as you can see from what I've done in those 15 years. So cancer, alcoholism, and suicide, and the book's called...
It's in front. The branding's in front of me on your...
Public Success, Private Grief.
Public Success, Private Grief. And how will people be able to get hold of
you
that?
can either look at my own website, or we've got a shortened version of the website name, which is ps-pg.com. So PS, Public Success -PG, Private Grief, although not so private now, .com.
I think one of the things I'm taking very strongly from what you've just shared there is your attitude to service, and that is one of the things I really cherish so much from these conversations with so many people across the east of England, in Norfolk, in Cambridge, and Cambridgeshire, in Suffolk, is that the number of people whose attitude is just driven to serve, in however you want to define that, but that attitude to be driven towards serving their community, their fellow man, their however you define it. And I just think that is a wonderful thing, especially that I hope we're going back to a place where service and duty are more respected than they have been hitherto, especially over the last 6 or 7 years, especially. But it is an honour to have spent this time with you this afternoon, to share some of your experience, and to talk about not just investing but also your wider attitude. And when we walked in here, I was sort of amazed and just thinking, the vibrancy with which you're still addressing life is something.
Well, one of the reasons I'm so positive is because life for me and for others around me would be pretty bad and people do. I mean, people disappear into really dark places because of cancer. And I was. If you'd seen me 2 years ago, when I'd just been diagnosed and the drug I'm on hadn't started working, you would have found a very different Peter. Things were really, really tough there. But then, of course, on top of that, losing 2 children, again, I just decided, and it's not resilience, stoicism, I don't think. I think somehow it's something which I believe is something called post-traumatic growth, which you probably hadn't heard of, which I only found out about fairly recently. It's a term used in the suicide postvention rather than prevention support networks, which is postvention is helping people who are bereaved by suicide, so people who have lost somebody, or even by attempted suicide, and post-traumatic growth seems to be post a trauma. It doesn't have to be suicide necessarily, where you actually develop from it in a way that I really haven't worked out how I've done that. But part of that is, of course, is to be positive, because I wouldn't be sitting here if I was miserable. You wouldn't want to talk to me, would you?
Well, I definitely do.
Would want to talk to me.
No, indeed. And I think there's that. I really recognise that determination to make something of the experience and not have it have been, for naught. Just to
and people will find it a bit strange. The listeners to this will find it a bit strange how I've coped. And maybe there'll be some clues in the book if you get a chance to read it.
Well, please do. And Peter Cowley, I could carry on talking all afternoon, but it has been an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you on Eastern Promise this afternoon.
Thank you very much,
Who better to embody the spirit of Eastern Promise than you?
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you.
My thanks to Peter, and I'm delighted to say that Public Success, Private Grief is now available for purchase. Go to ps-pg.com to order your copy. That's papasierra-papagolf.com to order your copy. What Peter himself terms his final book details the succession of tragic events which shaped his life, fueling his relentless drive and ambition. The book also shares how Peter found positivity and strength, turning the tables in the face of tragedy and adversity. Public Success, Private Grief may not be easy reading, but at its heart, it's intended to be an inspirational and self-empowering memoir about overcoming tragedy and forging resilience. And I know many will continue to benefit from Peter's hard-won wisdom. Don't forget to check out our latest episode of Crowd Sorcery.
Crowd sorcery.
No, not here. on the Eastern Promise podcast feed, and join me over the coming weeks, where we'll bring you highlights from the East of England Tech Collaboration event, recorded at the spellbinding Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts in Norwich. I'll be journeying to deepest Cambridgeshire to find out how the good folk of Gildon Morden banded together to save their local pub, the 3 Tons, from closure, with help from Plunkett UK and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. Meanwhile, the River Colne, Groundwork East, lay out how they're supporting the people of Watford to revive and reclaim the river for the benefit of the community. We'll talk to the teams from across the region who are vying for victory at the Aviva FinTech Hackathon in the Insurance Titans' iconic Marble Hall. The Cambridge Acorn Project will share with us their vital work in providing therapy to children, young people and families connected to trauma, abuse and financial hardship. Verily, 'tis time to look anew at King's Lynn.
Arr!
Plunder, piracy, witches and whales, bad bishops and bitter builders, murder, malice, and perhaps inevitably, Shakespeare. If you think you know this West Norfolk town, that just proves you've never visited. Keep listening to Eastern Promise to discover more, and remember, always pillage before you burn.
Arr!
That's all coming your way soon. Not the burning or the pillaging, that is. Until then, bye for now. To hear other episodes of the Eastern Promise podcast, and to find out more about what we do, go to our website at easternpromise.org.uk. Eastern Promise is a Priors-Croft production in association with Mills and Reeve, achieving more together.